Okay, we're rolling. This is July 30th, 2016. We're doing session 3, which deals with Robert's life, and this is part 4.
Okay. As I just stated previously in the other session, that there were a number of loved ones who passed on within too short a period of time. An uncle I was born for passed on cancer again. By the end of that particular year, I had gotten to the point where nothing made sense. And I basically had decided at one point, okay, after all the prayers for healing that went unanswered, I basically took the attitude of, hey God, you contact me sometime, don't expect me to contact you. I entered college at a church school in Central Florida, and one of the requirements is we had to attend a weekly meeting called a convocation. It happened every Wednesday morning. If we missed more than one, we could actually end up being expelled, failed the semester. Well, one of these meetings I went to had a representative from the ARE, the Association of Research and Enlightenment, Edgar Cayce's foundation. And I met some of the people from the local ARE group. I didn't even know that we had a local ARE group at the time. And they asked if I would like to come attend their meetings. And so I figured, well, what's to lose? Why not? I'd give it a try. It was wonderful. Some of the most loving, caring, compassionate people, and God-oriented people. And they had prayer groups, prayer projects, and prayer groups. They also studied some of the Cayce books. One of their favorites is a twin in a series called Search for God Part 1 and Search for God Part 2, based on the Cayce materials. And in those groups, I found that I was able to join in everything from doing readings for the people. My abilities to see auras really started happening about that time. Though frankly, I think we all see the aura, which is a light field, a biochemical, bioenergetic light field that emanates from us and from within us as well. There can be pictures or thought forms in there. There can be pictures from another lifetime in there even. You can tell a person's health, mental and physical, through their aura field. But at first I began seeing just kind of a dark zone around people that was different from the air above them, further out from them. Then that zone began to have color and light in it as I was able to see it better. Now I take it for granted. I believe we all see auras all the time. We just don't know we do. We're trained not to know it by this world.
How old were you again?
I was in, let's see, I think I was 21.
Okay.
A number of things happened at that time. I joined the Edgar Cayce group, took part in a lot of prayer projects, actually started doing some healing work there, based on work I had started doing previous to that in 1969. No, I take it back, I'm sorry. Late 1970, when my cousin came from Atlanta, Georgia, down to Florida to visit us. And she had a blister between her thumb and forefinger. She had been driving all day and worked a blister up on herself. So I just put my hand in the air over it and about 6 inches above it, and she said the pain went away. And the blister actually healed up faster than she was used to. At one point, she told my family, my parents and myself, about her boyfriend in an apartment complex back in Atlanta, Georgia, that he had contacted her to tell her that he was beginning one of his migraines. They were having a cool front come through. He had served in the Vietnam War and been injured in his skull and had a steel plate put in the skull. And whenever the barometric pressure would change from air mass coming down, from the way I understand it, or temperature changes would happen, he would get these horrible 3-day long migraine headaches. And he went to the doctor to get help. The doctors were not able to help him. So she asked me if I could do an out-of-body projection, which I became proficient in by that time. And I'll step back to that in just a little bit. But as I did project, I projected to his apartment in Atlanta, Georgia, as though I was actually there in the air, seeing everything. And I mean, I picked up nitpicky stuff that you wouldn't think about even. I also saw him asleep on his couch with a TV on a shelf, small personal-sized TV, on a shelf at the end of his couch with a racing program on. And I told my cousin, I said, your boyfriend's going to wake up at 3 tonight, he's going to be healed. His headache will be over. And she said, that's impossible. It's just started, it goes for 3 days. And come to find out, the next day she comes back to visit, and she'd been staying with her mother overnight, my aunt, and one of my dad's sisters. And she comes in and says, I don't know what you did, but one, you were right about everything you saw in his apartment, to the T. She said, I've spoken with him. He was asleep when you were there. He was sleeping on the couch. He does have a personal-sized TV on his shelf at the end of his couch. I've seen it, and he said he did have a racing program on. He loved racing. And then she said, and you must have touched with healing, because he woke up at 3 in the morning and was completely healed. His headache was gone.
There you go.
And I thank God for that. Then I gave him a warning that the next week he would be working on, and I think I named the day, it was probably like on a Tuesday, he would be working on an electric circuit in one of the apartments in his complex. He was like the super. And that something was going to go wrong, for him to be very careful that he had really turned the proper switches off. Because I said, I hate to say this, but enough current's going to come through, it's going to kill you if you're not damn careful. Well, next Tuesday morning, he did end up working on a light switch in one of the apartments, a faulty switch. He thought he had turned off the proper breakers to it. Then he remembered my warning, and he put down his uninsulated pliers and picked up a pair of insulated channel lock pliers and started to do the work he needed to do. Enough voltage came through there that it knocked him backwards, knocked the pliers out of his hands, and melted the insulation.
Wow.
Thank God he's alive, I guess, to this day.
Yeah.
And I began finding out, just because I was turning away from God, didn't mean God was turning away from me.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is who we are. We can't really turn away from it. We can, for a little while, push it to the background, but sooner or later, we'll come back to it. It's our nature. It's our identity. It's who we are. It's so, it's like I like to say, and Paul knows this, it's so natural, it's super natural. Mm-hmm. Earlier in 1971, I had gone through a set of classes with a spiritualist minister who came, she actually lived in Canada, but she would come down and do the circuit, as they called it, down through the United States, even down to Florida, and then go back up north again, back up to Canada. She came to this one class where this medical secretary was holding classes on meditating and the auras and metaphysics. And she taught high self meditation done through Kundalini meditation. The Kundalini is referred to as the serpent. It's the energy in your spine that goes through different energy frequency points along, that they spin around in different points along your spine, until you get up to the one in your crown chakra at the top of your head. So from the base of your spine all the way up to the top of your head. And then you can leave your body that way. And that's how I learned to go out of body. Sitting in a very uncomfortable, well, it was air conditioned, but barely, small living room. I was sitting on the floor, with a piece of curlicue wooden furniture with the curlicue gouging into my back for 2 hours. But I was still able to make it to this level and get out of my body anyway. So that's how I learned to do out of body. When I was younger, in my teens, I would do it without meaning to. I would do what they call astral projection. A little bit different experience than just willing yourself out of your body. And I would fall asleep watching TV at night, and I'd be floating all of a sudden. I'd feel this sensation of weakness, like I was going through something, and I felt like I was soaking through something, and I was weak for a moment when it happened. And the next thing is I'd be above me, looking all the way around my room, thinking more clearly than I did even when I was awake. And then I would see my mom come in my bedroom talking to me, trying to wake me up. And I couldn't respond, and yet I knew I was awake, but I couldn't make my mouth, I couldn't respond. And then she'd be bending over me, taking my glasses off my face and putting them on the bedside table and leaving the room. The next day I would argue with her, "Mom, I was awake when you were in my room. I saw you coming in. I saw you bending over me, taking off my glasses." To which she would say, "No, you were sound asleep, your eyes were closed shut, and you couldn't have seen me." Finally, it dawned on me after this happened a number of times, now I know what's happening. I'm going out of body. I'm not trying to do it. It's just happening. Astral projection. Well, later on when I learned this Kundalini meditation, I learned to command it, how to go out of my body at will. Now I basically just think of a place I want to be. Instead of having to go from point A to B to C to D to get there, I just am there. The truth is, we're everywhere all at once. Pick where you want to be. It's a much simpler way, and it really works. In the first Gulf War, for example, I began, I think it was, what was that called? Desert Storm. I began trying to spy in on Iraq a little bit. And I saw these old-fashioned looking rockets. And they were like on trucks. And I kept hearing the name Shud, Scud, Shud, Scud, Shud, Scud, 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 Scud. What does that mean? What is Scud? A few days later, I heard on the news, Scud rockets. They were old-style Russian rockets that Saddam Hussein was getting ready to throw at different countries to destabilize the Middle East when we were trying to get the Iraqis out of Kuwait. So this is just, it's a godlike power because it is part of God. To recognize that you're everywhere all at once, every win all at once. Pick when and where you want to be. And there's nowhere you can't look in on it. And there's no defense against it. So, going back to the 70s, when I began joining these various groups, one was this metaphysics group, is what we called it, taught by this medical secretary. Another was the ARE group. And I began going to the Unity Church in the city where I live. Excuse me. And at times I went to a church in the St. Petersburg, Florida area called the Temple of the Living God. They're a Christian-based, spiritualistic, metaphysical church. Now, I'm bringing that up because it's quite important. One evening at these metaphysics groups taught by this medical secretary, after the meeting was over and everybody filed out, she asked me to join her in a meditation, and I did. Next thing I knew was I was out of body. I was up at the ceiling looking down on this strange being I saw when I was 4 years old. Michael, the archangel.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking down between his wings as they went up past the ceiling. And in between his wings was this pillar of fire coming up from his head, spiraling, with a triangle pointing downward with a stylized number 3 as part of the triangle. And it was just rotating effortlessly in the middle of this pillar of fire. at the top of it. Now, when I described what I saw to this medical secretary, she said that's one of two things. It's either the Hindu Om, which is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, or it's the Catholic Trinity, which is God, and is the most powerful force in the universe. And then she told me to say hi to this being, so I swung around to where I could see him in front, standing there, double-handed sword pointed down, the point at the floor at rest. And I said, "Hi, how are you?" I didn't know what else. What do you say to an archangel? And he just gave a brief nod, like he did back when I was 4. And he said, "This is enough for now. I'll talk to you more tomorrow." Well, I'm thinking, okay, whoopee, we'll see how that goes. Who knows? And the meeting broke up. I went home and drew a picture of him. I love to draw. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I do love to draw. So the next day I'm walking between classes in college. I didn't drive at that time. And I feel this same presence from the night before. Michael. And he's telling me things point for point for point that are very important about the rest of my life. One of the things he said was that I was the New Age Messiah based on the fact that I was the Messiah 2,000 years ago, coming back to do it again. He said that I didn't have all the cards yet, so to speak, but I would later on in life, and that I was here to help usher in the New Age. Not New Age as most people think of New Age, philosophy, but the age of people coming to know who they really are, God. So as I am walking along and hearing this voice, not my voice, and I don't hear voices. This one time I did. I finally got to the class I had to go to, went in for that, sat down, got back home, got a phone call from this medical secretary. "Hey Bob, would you like to go with me to the Temple of the Living God in St. Pete tomorrow? I've lined up for you to have a free reading from a well-known psychic. She's world-renowned." And I said, "Yeah, I've never refused a free reading. I'm always the one doing it for people. It'd be nice to have one for a change done for me." Well, this woman didn't know me from Adam, the psychic that I went to see. We went to the church. It was on a Saturday. The medical secretary goes to talk to the preacher of the church. I sit across a card table from this beautiful, voluptuous, she looked like she was 21 or so. Found out later on she was in her 40s. Again, world-renowned, well-known psychic. She didn't have any cards on the table or anything. She prayed briefly, and then she said, "You have a guardian angel." "No, he's an angel standing behind you." She began to describe him. I said, "I know, I've got one at home." Years later, when the movie about the Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, and they're showing the lead character, Roy, the pictures of the Devil's Teapot, and he says, "Oh yeah, I've got one in my living room, the model he built up to the ceiling." That's kind of what that reminded me of. I had a picture of Michael that I had drawn a few nights before. So then she says, he says his name is and I said, "Archon?" And then she said, "He says that'll do for now. I want to explain something before people go apeshit about Archon. The term Archon is dual meaning. Actually, it's more like 3 meanings. One use of the word meant the governors or rulers in ancient Greece, human rulers. Another term was what the angels in heaven, the archangels, used to call themselves, and still do. We're the ones who call them archangels, archons. Then there are the other archons that were the fallen ones, the dark ones. So you've got archons of light, archons of darkness.
Yeah.
Now, you can Google this and look it up for yourselves. Michael, obviously, is about as high as you get in the archons of light. He had told me a number of things the day before. Well, this psychic sat there and quoted him word for word for word for exact word for 20 minutes was me sitting there breaking out in goosebumps and slightly shaking and feeling like I wanted to get up, bolt up and run out of there as fast as I could, and yet part of me was also fascinated. She quoted Michael on everything he said, and everything he said has come true so far with a vengeance. Well, I shouldn't say with a vengeance, but with exactitude. These are some of the things that were going on at that time. Right about that same period of time, I began experimenting with what they call the Geller effect, named after the famous Israeli mentalist and psychic Uri Geller. He has the ability not only to do ESP, but to bend spoons and alter matter and change matter and move matter around mentally. And
I think, let me just interject, a lot of people have in their minds discredited him.
Yeah.
But I believe that did you know that I think he was investigated or looked into by our military?
He was used by our military.
Yeah.
And he's been used by some of our oil companies too.
Yeah.
No, the man's genuine.
Just like a lot of the guys that came out of remote viewing in the 80s ended up running their own companies and are helping these oil companies find oil and stuff, using it as among other things.
Right. And that's part of how he was doing his work, from what I understand. And I've actually seen him face to face.
Oh, neat.
He appeared at the lake. Just a minute. He appeared at a civic center where I was living at the time, and I was as close to him as I am to your phone right now.
Uh-huh.
And everything he did was on also closed circuit large TV. So, this comment that I think was made by the amazing Randy that, he's using laser beams or chemicals to make things bend and melt.
Yeah.
Well, you would need a massive laser beam with a massive power source and some way to deliver it without burning your hand.
Yeah.
Or you would need chemicals that would be so caustic you couldn't hold them while you were holding a piece of metal without gloves or something. I saw him actually stroke a fork until it bent down and then just broke off. The prongs broke off and fell on the floor. And then when you pull them back up together again, the matter didn't match together. The matter was done away with partly there. Now, as I myself was working with this to some degree, and later on in the 70s, I actually bent a fork at a restaurant one night. Again, humor is good. I mean, this really happened. I'm working on this fork, and this engineer is for an aircraft company, is a friend of mine at the time, is witnessing me take this fork and stroke it sometimes, or just rubbing it. And the fork started bending down. Well, the waitress comes up to take our order, and I said, "Oh, miss, may I buy this?" She said, "What do you mean?" "The fork, may I buy it?" "What happened to it?" "Well, I bent it with my mind." She goes, "Then," I said, "and I feel responsible. It's the restaurant's property. May I buy it and take it home with me?" Then she said, Just put it in your pocket. I don't want to see it. Get that out of my sight. I don't want to see it." Then she walks away from us. My first evening here, and I have to get him." Same restaurant, at another time, there are knives around the table, as they should be, a place setting. Again, the same engineer witnessing all this. I'm holding one knife, and it starts developing very little bits of wavy designs in the metal of the blade. And then the curved tip of the knife all of a sudden is gone, and it's straight like it had been laser beamed off.
Uh-huh.
It didn't fall on the floor. It wasn't there anymore.
Wow.
Now, either we have the destruction of matter into energy without a bright flash of light and no mushroom radioactive cloud, or we have matter being shared into another dimensional space, which I think is probably what happened. But I began doing more and more of this type of stuff. Meanwhile, also doing a lot more in the healing realm, which I totally loved. That is my tie-in from 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, at this medical secretary's meetings, we had a woman coming in coughing well, I don't know if she even stopped. She was coughing constantly, deep, really bad cough. And at one point I said, what happened? And she said, well, I had cancer and I had chemo and I had radiation therapy. And my lungs are all gunked up from the radiation therapy. They had made x-rays of her lung that day. So she asked if I would help her with healing. You see, with healing, I never go after somebody and say, here, let me heal you. Because that's not sharing. A person comes and asks for it. Then they're open to it. And healing is always a shared process. I don't care if it's between doctor and patient, which is fine, or whether it's between a minister and someone, parishioner coming to them, or friend to friend. The fact is, healing is always a shared process, or it doesn't happen. It can never happen in a vacuum. See, God is the relationship shared. That's what healing. Healing is the restoration of our focus back onto wholeness, which has always been there forever. Wholeness never stops existing. But our attention can get shifted to other things, more fearful things, or other things that convince us for a while that we're not whole and that wholeness isn't there.
Yeah.
So healing is simply shifting our focus back to where it's supposed to be, our divine birthright. Wholeness. Okay. I went, as I did with anyone I did healing work with. I went and stood behind the woman. The woman's shoulders are here, my hands are up here. I never touched her. For about 5 minutes. And I just knew that something wonderful was going to happen, and I was praying for, and I was sensing energy coming from me to her, and visualizing in my mind her being healthy, happy. And then I went and sat down. After 15 minutes, she was only coughing once in a while. About 10 minutes later, she stopped coughing completely.
Nice.
She went to her doctor the next day and had another x-ray made. Her lungs were completely clear.
Wow.
The doctor asked, how did it happen? What'd she do? That couldn't possibly happen that way. She refused to tell him because I could have gotten arrested. Now, I mean, it's pathetic.
Yeah, it is.
I began having to actually do healing in the Unity Church where I was going to church because I would have the protection of the church where healing is supposed to happen and prayerfulness is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But even though I was not touching the person, I was not diagnosing the person, I wasn't doing anything other than just praying and sharing wholeness. That could have potentially gotten me arrested for practicing medicine without a license, even though I wasn't practicing medicine at all. I was practicing wholeness.
Yeah.
And the medical secretary became freaked after that because she said, it's one thing if a person has a headache. That can be psychosomatic. But this is something different. And if you get arrested, I can be arrested because I'm providing the location. So she said, from now on, let's cut back on the healing.
Some modern life we live in, huh?
Yeah.
Real evolved.
And I worked with people with cancer, and wonderful results happened there. I think I was probably at my happiest in this life when I was working with healing back there in the early and mid-70s. But I was also experimenting with the Geller effect back in those days and influencing the weather as well. Perhaps we should save that for the next installment.
All right, cool. All right.